Men in general don't want to be viewed as being weaker than women in any type of capacity, generally speaking. And you can call that misogynistic or whatever, but it's just the truth. Believe it or not, this is my third time attempting to record this stupid video. I'm so annoyed. Couple of things. First, let's get it out the way because I don't want to hear your shit in the comments. This is an air mattress. That's a pillow. Yes, I'm recording in a room with an air mattress and a pillow. Why? Family's over. It's the holidays. Didn't feel like taking it down. You'll be fine. You will be fine. Don't want to hear nothing in the comments about, how broken, poor I look, whatever. Earlier this week, I recorded a 10-minute audio of me speaking about my issues with Scott Galloway. And for some reason, the file got corrupted and I lost it. And so I'm here to record, again, my thoughts on why Scott Galloway isn't doing it for me as the face of helping men and boys. But I keep rambling. I'm not saying what I actually really think and feel, and I'm trying not to, do that in these videos. So third time is the charm. It really, because I'm not doing this again. So let's start with who Scott Galloway is, right? If you don't know Scott Galloway, I'll put this mini bio here, this overview that I found on the internet. But really, you will know this dude if you watch CNN, if you watch the Bill Maher, show, if you watch a podcast. He's the white dude with glasses, kind of good-looking dude that has been going around speaking about men and boys and the problems that men and boys are having, and kind of why you should care and what we can do to possibly address these issues that men and boys are having, right? Which, again, I agree with this assessment, and I commend Scott for caring about this issue and not being so afraid of being labeled as anti-woman that it kept him from giving voice to a very real issue, because this is a real issue that needs to be taken seriously. I just don't think Scott is the one that I would want to be leading in the charge, but for some reason he's been promoted as the guy to lead the charge, and it bothers me. Every time I watch Scott, he'll say things that I agree with, maybe 70 or maybe 80% of the what comes out of his mouth, right? But then that 20 though, it really, normally you should be able to just say, you know what, eat the meat, spit out the bones, take the 80% and just ignore the 20. But if the 20% is so bad or so annoying that you feel like it'll turn off anyone from even hearing the 80, you can't look past that, so to speak. And Scott is guilty of that, I think, right? And so I kind of wanted to go over the main things that he says that I find to be so triggering for me. And number one is, if you ever listen to him or you'll watch these interviews, he has this spiel, these points that he always hits. But one part of his kind of diatribe is he'll say, as a heterosexual straight white male, he benefited greatly from the country, when he was a young man, in ways that just don't benefit the young men today. And why should young men today be paying a price because of the privilege that he had as a straight white male? And again, I get what he's doing, right? He's trying to get ahead of the, oh my God, you're an anti-woman. We still have so much more work left to do for women. He's trying to get ahead of that because people in this country, unfortunately, feel like if you are a white dude, straight white heterosexual male, that you have been so privileged at all times of your life that it is audacious for you to even think about trying to advocate for any type of sympathy or empathy for the plight of people who look like you. Now, I don't feel that way. I think that is a very dark and twisted way to view the world, really, if I'm being totally honest. I think life is hard for damn near everybody. Now, I do think life can be objectively hard, and I don't use the word objectively all that often when I discuss these issues, but I suppose there is a person's life that I would say this person's life is probably objectively more tragic than everybody else's, but I think that's rare in America anyway, in the West for the most part. And so I hate the talking point so much because even though I understand what he's doing, I think it opens up some problems for Scott and his talking point that I don't think he has considered, right? Number one problem that talking point brings up, if we're having a conversation about men, but you interject race into it, meaning white men, you kind of opened the door for the conversation to go an entirely another way. Because to say that should men be discriminated against, or should men today have to suffer because of the privileges that you had, it assumes that this conversation is or should center around white American men. When I would argue that this is not a white American male issue, this is kind of a male issue within a post-feminist Western society issue. Because I think ultimately what we're dealing with here is more of a like men just not knowing their role or their purpose, where if everyone's job is to provide and make money and to be the decision maker, and that role was reserved for the quote unquote males, well then if everyone can do it, then what's reserved for me? You see what I'm saying? What does it mean to be a man in 2025 is kind of the crux at what's causing a lot of this angst for the most part, right? I don't think it has anything to do with race. And so when Scott has that talking point, he introduces race into this conversation, but he just didn't need to. Even though I understand why he's doing it. I just think he should make them bring it up instead of him bringing it up himself, if you're asking me. That's one thing that he does that annoys me. Another thing that Scott does is, if you hear Scott talk, he talks in a way sometimes where you can agree with his point, but the framing of it is just so, like, it's framed in a way that I know other dudes are like, oh man, F this dude, right? For example, one talking point that Scott has is he'll talk about how even though boys and men may be physically stronger than women and girls, there's a lot of evidence that goes to show that they are emotionally and psychologically weaker than women and girls.
When a boy loses a male role model, at that moment, he becomes more likely to be incarcerated and graduate from college. So what the research shows is the following, is that while boys are physically stronger, they're emotionally, neurologically, and mentally much weaker than girls. And we don't know if it's because women have had, throughout the ages, had to menstruate or give birth, that they're just quite frankly tougher. But I'll give you a really rattling statistic. 2 15-year-olds sexually molested a boy and a girl. Neither crime is less or more heinous than the other. The boy who's sexually molested is 10 times more likely to kill himself later than life than the girl. Boys are weaker.
He also uses fathers not being in the home as another example, right? That, if in single mother-led homes, girls kind of do just as well if the father is involved versus men, they do terrible or a lot worse in single mother-led homes in comparison to them being raised in homes with fathers, right? And so he uses these two examples a lot to show that, this shows that men and boys are just weaker than girls emotionally and psychologically. But I think that's just a terrible way to frame the conversation, because men in general don't want to be viewed as being weaker than women in any type of capacity, generally speaking. And you can call that misogynistic or whatever, but it's just the truth. And so if you're trying to not just reach women to be empathetic to men, you kind of want men to listen to your message as to how they should order or structure their life, Scott, especially if you are giving kind of a solutions or things that you think men need to be doing to change their life or to get themselves out of their current predicaments, right? So I think that's just like terrible to phrase it as, you're weaker, right? I also think those two specific examples, I don't think either one of those really show that men and boys are necessarily weaker than women. If anything, I would say these would show that boys and girls probably have unique biological and evolutionary psychological profiles. And so that when they come into contact with certain trauma, it can really derail them differently. For example, in the case in which a male role model is not raised in a home with a boy, it is not shocking to me that the boy's life gets turned upside down in ways in which a girl's life does not. The male role model is literally the person who the boy is walking in the footsteps of. He's your model parent. Right? Like, this is the dude that is supposed to be your ideal example, your prime example of who you should hope to be for the most part. And so, of course, that would hurt boys more than it hurt girls. Not because they're psychologically or mentally weaker, but because their roadmap has been ripped from their life. A favorite example to me would be to compare boys in households where the father's not around to households that girls are raised in where the mom is not around. Now, again, this isn't an equal scenario, right? There are significantly more households where boys are raised without fathers than girls that are raised without mothers, and there are various reasons for that I'm not going to get into in this video. But to me, that would be more fair because the girl models herself after the mother, and the boy models himself after the father. So I don't understand why he chooses to compare boy not having a dad with girl not having a dad. I don't like that, right? In the case of the sexual assault, again, both equally tragic, which I appreciate him saying. That said, the fact that boys, again, are more derailed than girls doesn't take into consideration how an incident that is horrible for both of them can impact them differently psychologically. And so it's not a weaker thing. It's a psychological difference. For example, if you are a boy and you're molested, one of the things that a lot of boys unfortunately have to deal with after that happens, they don't just deal with, oh my God, I was violated by this person. They then begin to question their own sexual identity, especially if they are within that, 6, 7, 8-year-old age range, right? Meaning, am I gay? Did he do this because he thought I was not straight for some reason, that I was gay? And so if you're a girl and you're being molested by an older man, again, tragic, but you don't suddenly have an issue of questioning your orientation now. Like, oh my God, am I a lesbian? It doesn't happen. Now, both the boy and the girl has to deal with being violated by an adult, but the difference in the fact that the perpetrator overwhelmingly is usually male, that male to male matters. Male to male molestation matters, and male to female, you're gonna have a difference. And so I just wish he would stop making that point. Like, whenever he says it, I just cringe. Like, Scott, what are you doing, man? Like, what are you doing? And the last thing I'm gonna say why I don't think Scott should be leading this movement is because Scott is not unapologetically pro-male, and I don't think young men are going to be responsive, or they're not going to want to listen to anyone who they feel like is not in their corner unapologetically. And when you say things like, as a straight white male, this or that, or Scott also makes the point to always mention that, we have so much left to work on girls and women. And, again, we don't do that with anything else. There's very few issues where you have to kind of qualify why you care about the issue. And I just don't think if you have to qualify why you care about boys and men, you're just not the person for the job. In the long run, right? In the long run. Maybe Scott is kind of like John the Baptist. You know how John the Baptist came, before Jesus to prepare the way for him to do his ministry. Maybe that's Scott's job, right? So he's not the guy to kind of get us over the hump. He was the person to kind of break into the mainstream, to make it as palatable as possible. To just drop it into people's minds. Maybe that's his role. And if that is his role, I salute you, Scott, for your contribution to making life easier for American boys and men. But someone needs to tell him, Scott, this is kind of your role, and your time is up, buddy, for the most part. And that's how I feel. I don't think Scott can really lead the way for men and boys, right? I think his advice is just not going to work going forward, right? I think he lists the 3 Ps where he talks about what men need to do. They need to protect, provide, and procreate. That just doesn't cut it anymore. No woman in a Western society really needs protection. Most of us live in urban cities, right, where we have police forces. If, you can buy your own weapon, you can buy a gun, you can buy a taser, you can buy a pepper spray. In a Western country that has police, what does a man protecting look like? You see what I'm saying? He has the provider P. Women are making more money than their male counterparts in many cities in America today, especially under the age of 30. These trends, for the most part, don't show any sign of really reversing. Once women enter the working force, they enter the working force, right? Their existence within the working force to a certain degree limits the capacity for men to earn much more money, right? Because you have many more people to compete with, for jobs, right? Like, it is what it is. Most households in America, both parents work, right? So who are you providing for? Just to be quite frankly, this whole traditional relationship thing is just not realistic. It's not going to work. And then the last point, he says procreation. I get what he means. You should be looking to ask women out. Have sex. I got you. And he chose procreation just to keep it all peace. I don't think even he believes that you actually have to. If you don't want no kids, you're a real man, right? But yeah, that P I don't have a problem with that much. The first two, I think the way forward for men is we have to kind of have our own, not feminist movement, but we have to view what it means to be a man outside of what it means to just be to be those P's, right? Don't really need you to protect anymore. Don't really need you to be a provider. Who are you? In this new world that we are embarking upon, where you have AI, you have computers, you have physical strength just means less and less as the decades go by. So these differences between men and women really don't show up that often in our day-to-day world, right? So what does it mean to be a man when women make just as much, if not more than you? When you may not want to have children? These are not easy questions to answer. And it's going to be a painful couple of, years where men have to kind of sit with themselves, in my opinion, to kind of really think about, okay, what are the solutions to to this issue, right? We have to recraft masculinity and manhood. I don't think you're going to be able to go back and build this thing up. It's not going to happen. We have to find our way on our own and define men separate from women in the same way that feminism was women defining themselves separate from men. That's what has to happen. And I don't think Scott really has figured that out yet. Right. So that's what I have for today. Let me know your thoughts. Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? Are you a Scott Galloway fan? I would love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, deuces.